Welcome everybody to episode 9 of Black, Brown, Yellow, White. And today I'm here with Marilyn Umurungi. Very happy to have you here, very excited. And she works for IAMANEH. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, exactly.
A Swiss organization whose commitment is to making a contribution to eradicating poverty and to a more just world, as well as promoting gender inequality. The acronym stands for International Association for Maternal and Neonatal Health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Promoting gender equity, actually.
Equity, okay, yeah. And she works as the expert on gender, equity, and transformation.
Yeah.
So she also notably works as the co-curator of the Swiss Landesmuseum for the present exhibition Colonial,
Yeah.
Swiss Global Entanglements, I think. So before we get immediately to the heart of the matter, I know it's very difficult and maybe impossible. I've said this before, but could you give us your life in a super compact form so that we know our protagonist?
Well, I was born and raised in Rwanda,
Mm-hmm.
and I came to Switzerland before the genocide started in Rwanda. I was really young. I was about between 6 and 7.
Okay.
And
So thanks for that vivid biography. Then the next question I normally ask my interviewees is about sources of inspiration. Like if you look back on your life so far, what are maybe works of art or historical figures or figures in your social network sources that have inspired you?
if I look back, I find it really hard to answer that because you tend to just think about the most recent thing that have influenced you. But if I try to really look back, when did I get started to maybe shape into who I am today? Then I think it was really, when I told you, it was really in this time when I was around maybe between 12 and 16, 17, 18, when I started to kind of realize, okay, I'm different than the others around me. I am being somehow treated differently, but I didn't really know why I'm being treated differently. And it's in the same time that I started to also read, maybe read books that are not that you're not forced to read. I know you're a teacher, but read also books that outside of what school will give you to read. And I remember that I think it's between 13 and 15, and I'm not really sure when. I read the book of the rapper and author and also activist Sister Souljah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know her.
I've heard of her.
Yeah, Sister Souljah. At that time, nobody really knew her. I think still now. And yeah, she's a social activist. She's a political activist. And I read The Coldest Winter Ever. And I remember that I was so captivated, but also kind of confused by the strength and the courage of the figures in the book. The book is about the black ghettos in Brooklyn before and during and after the civil rights movement. So how they kind of developed. And I remember that reading that book, it was the first book that I read where I was kind of introduced to the concept of racism. I had never read a book before that that had that concept in it, and I remember I was like, oh, okay, so I think what I am living in Switzerland is racism, because until that time, we never, I'm talking about 20 years ago, right? And at that time, there was not such a thing as now all the time in school they talk about racism. Racism has, came into Swiss schools. It is, teachers have to kind of like talk about it. Discrimination is a thing, but 20 years ago it was not really such a thing. You talked about xenophobia and stuff like that, but not racism as such a thing. And I remember reading that book and I was like, oh my God, I think what I'm experiencing is racism.
Wow.
And I had like a term for it, and it allowed me to kind of like also, delve into, okay, what is the civil rights movement and all that stuff, and so definitely Sister Soldier. And because I Sister Soldier was such a influence, like, because I really liked that book, I started to listen to female rap. And so I would say like my first influences was actually Afro-American female rap, like Lauryn Hill, MC Lyte, Roxanne Shante, like Yo-Yo Whittaker, Queen Latifah, or even Ariana Puello, who was from the Dominican Republic. That was like the first interest, way before I would actually read like, these influential, intellectual, like feminist writers. It was rap, and I was always fascinated by, especially Lauryn Hill, because I was like, she can keep up with the boys, she's like a badass. And that was like so influential for me. Like I was like, okay, that impressed me. I was not impressed by guys being gangsters. Like everybody will listen to Wu-Tang Clan. I don't know if you remember. Everybody was like, Wu-Tang Clan and niggas with attitude. And I was not impressed by that at all. I was like, no man, Lauryn Hill, like she can spit bars, man. That's crazy, And then much later, obviously trying to understand what are they speaking about. What is their struggle? I started to actually go into also intellectual, orders. So I will start to like, read Audre Lorde. I will start to read Maya Angelou, or James Baldwin and stuff like that.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump straight actually to the core of this interview series, and with that very blunt question, what to you is your understanding of racism, and where do you see its causes and effects?
Yeah. So what is my understanding of racism? Obviously, I could give you like a definition, but for me, racism is first and foremost like a construct. Is a construct that has been created to legitimize hierarchy, to legitimize also segregating oppression. And in that construct, it's a construct that kind of like say that that attributes certain traits and certain intelligences to certain kind of people, and in that construct to be very, very, to say it how it is, the white male, the white Christian male is on the top of this hierarchy, and the black Muslim woman is on the lowest of this hierarchy. And so I always say, because obviously in my work as a curator in the National Museum, people ask me that question a lot, and I always answer like it's a construct that legitimizes segregating oppression, but it's also a system, okay? And in that system, that construct is constantly reinvented, and it constitutes itself, and it's reinvented in different forms, and it also changes over the years, right? Because in the from maybe I would say from the 15th century, from the 15th century to the 20th century, race as a concept was also used to legitimize or to actually explain the civilizing mission, right? Like to civilize certain countries and regions, and now in the 20th century, actually, in the like 90s, late 1940s, 50s. Scientists have proven that there is actually no empirical proof that there are different human races, that we are only one race. So this whole concept of race has been abandoned, but there is still a concept of differentiation, and this concept of differentiation we see in the idea of culture, because the idea of culture is a super problematic idea also. So as I said, in the 20th century, the concept of race was used to legitimize civilization missions. And today, the concept of culture and the apparent difference of human development in different cultures, that some cultures have more emancipation, they're more emancipated, have more freedom, and this concept of different culture is now used to legitimize the democratic mission, democratizing whole countries, and I say this, like, let's be honest, if a nation like the United States marched into a nation like Afghanistan to democratizing, they won't do it because of race issues, but they do it because of cultural ideas issues. And it's actually the same paradigm that we had when it was race. Now just today we call it culture. There is the same paradigm that is so deep of differentiating, of hierarchizing different kind of peoples.
And legitimizing these kind of interventions. So then I was also thinking, where do you see, especially now in Switzerland, these manifestations of racism?
So for me, that's a really interesting question, because Switzerland is very particular. So we have, in 1995, there was, we have the, I don't even know how you say it in English, but the Strafnorm, which is like the penal code that prohibits racial conduct and racist, you can actually take it to court if you're being attacked, or if you're being racialized. But the reality is that nobody does it, because you don't even know whether, first of all, there is a lack of knowledge about your rights. There is a lack of knowledge of what is it to be racialized. We now, since 5 years, have a little bit more knowledge about such a thing as racial profiling, that it exists, that you can actually take it to the, you can take it to the court. You can actually say, I have been racial profiled. You have a whole line of argument what it is to be racial profiled. But the reality of things in Switzerland is that a lot of people who will experience racial discrimination and racism won't really be able to go and call it out for what it is. And that has created a whole narrative or a whole social conduct of racism doesn't exist in Switzerland because it's not being called out for what it is. And this conduct, or this kind of this attitude or this narrative of racism doesn't exist is really, really deep in the society, And every time that there is an event like somebody's racial profiled, or a black person, it's often and most of the time black, dark-skinned men who are being maybe even murdered or shot out by police forces. Every time we have a single event that is obviously connected to racism, then it always just pops out as only a single event. That's unique. It's not speaking for a whole system. And every time you have to explain again, no, actually there is a whole system behind it. And people are being racialized. People are being racialized at work. People are being racialized in schools. Kids, young kids, even I told you my story about 20 years ago. I still hear the same stories of the little girl of my cousin. She's 5 years old. She still says that people still touch her hair. still say her hair is weird and funny and funky.
Yeah.
I talked to the the kid of a friend of mine who's from Sri Lanka. Her kid and her kid is not even dark skinned, so she's mixed, like half Sri Lankan, half Swiss, and even she hears stuff like, "Oh, you smell weird. Is it because of the curry that you eat? Is it because of the food that you eat?" These things are still around 20 years later.
Yeah.
But it's the narrative of, yeah, but it's not racism, it's jokes, and Swiss people are not racist, and how can there be racism because we never actually had issues with other cultures, since we never had colonies, and all these things.
Yeah. Okay. So racism is one of these 3 or 4 topics we want to look at. And then on the more positive side, there is the idea of diversity. And then for me also the question to you is, what is your understanding of diversity, and what kind of experiences and encounters with it have you made here in the Swiss setting?
Well, diversity popped out in like the last 5 years also, and it's an approach or a need and demand from a multicultural society to be represented in TV shows, in schools, in school boards, in whatever, like to be represented in the greater organs that actually shape political and social making of a city, of a society, and it was used so much in the last 5 years that sometimes you thought, or I felt that it had became kind of like also problematic, because to put it very bluntly, if diversity is an H&M publicity where they will just put a black girl, a blonde girl, and maybe an Asian looking girl, then it's problematic, because then it's actually tokenism, or then it's actually just, on a platitude of things, it's not really, it doesn't really go deep. So me personally, in my work, in what I do, I actually use the term critical diversity. So a diversity approach that really looks at power symmetries, like, okay, who has access to like knowledge, who doesn't, who has access to, I don't know, mobility and all these resources and all these things, and who does not. And if in that approach, if I'm always critical about who has the power and who has access, who has the visibility, who can speak, who can conduct an interview, you know what I mean? Like, who speaks about whom? And if I'm critical about that, and I create a multi-perspective approach in what I'm representing, then I create diversity, But diversity is not to have a panel where there is 2 men and 2 women, so there is diversity, but actually the 2 women will say the exact same thing as the 2 men, then I don't have diversity, even though I have 2 women, Diversity is that if I really look deeply at what am I representing there. And I think, because your question was like, how do I live it in Switzerland? We're not on that level yet. We're still on the surface, where we often, especially in like, in companies, or even in schools, to be honest, we will have diversity where there will be like, oh, okay, we don't have enough black employees. Let's have black employees, but they're not gonna have the same salaries. They're not gonna, you know what I mean? Like they don't have the same rights to actually, say something or speak out on this, and like, and then it's not diversity. Then it's just tokenism or quota.
Yeah, and you're advocating for this critical diversity that
critical
the different
diversity,
perspectives actually
exactly, and
matter.
then. And diversity can even mean that maybe you have at the end a panel where you have maybe 4 men, and not 2 men and 2 women, but these 4 men come from different geographical background, traditional cultural background. gender background, and then then you have a diversity.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. That's a more in-depth take on it, because I also... Okay, so that would be term number 2. And term number 3, which I would also like to look at with you, is the question of agency. In your own life, when did you maybe first have this kind of feeling of agency, that you are, so to speak, in charge of affairs, and where do you see the role of agency, also contrasting with racism and diversity?
When was the first time that I felt that I had agency? Oh my God, I think that changes all the time. Like today I feel like I have a lot of agency, and maybe on Monday, when there's going to be like a really shitty meeting at work, I feel like I'm stripped of all my agency. The first time, but I really love that question. I have to think about it, but the first time maybe that I felt, and maybe that sounds a bit paradoxical, but it's true for me. It's the truth for me. The first time that I felt that I have agency was when I stopped wanting to be like others. When I stopped wanting to blend in, when I stopped wanting to be the same weight as a white girl, look as a white girl, sound like a white girl. I'm speaking for me. When I stopped, denying the fact that I am in both culture. That when I go to Kigali, to Rwanda, I'm too white for them and too European. And when I'm here in Zurich, sometimes I'll be too African, and and then I have both. That I am in between seats, and when I embraced that, I don't have to blend in. I don't have to. You don't have to like me. You don't have to find me beautiful, because if you find blue eyes and blonde hair beautiful, be happy with it. Like when I stopped wanting to fit in, that was the first moment of agency. And from that moment, to be able to say, you know what, I am who I am, I look the way I look, and from that moment I could create actually a persona that is entirely manifesting the best that I can be out of myself, and not because I have to fit in.
Thanks, that was amazingly well put. I'm thinking, do you see any ties between this sense of agency and then racism on the one hand, or between the sense of agency and the diversity we were talking about? Do you see ties there?
I think, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to go too abstract, because I'm not, my expertise is not in cultural studies, right? But I think if as a community or group, because there is not such a thing as a black community. That's it's too simple-minded, or too simple thinking that there is a homogeneous black community. We're all different, but we do share the experience of being seen and read as black people, and we do maybe share similar experiences of being outcast and excluded from certain things in society. And I think where I can make maybe the link is that if, when you experience racism and you stop to want too much to adapt yourself to what maybe, I don't know how to say, but to what maybe is expected from you, as in your culture, in what is cultural understanding, like in your cultural understanding, or what, like, oh, but I don't know, I like an example, but, if maybe as a black community we stop creating who we are so much on the race that we are, and we step out and we know that we can be much more than basketballers, musicians and dancers, and the world is open, and we can be scientists, and you know what I mean, and we are not creating our identities and our struggle also in our identities around race or around racial experiences, then I think we can grow above that and beyond that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if not every intervention and every I don't know, everything that I experience is always about me first figuring out if I am accepted as a black person or as a woman, whatever, because that happens also in relationships, How do people fall in love? It's not because they are a man and a woman. It's because they're attracted to, to something that they see in the other. Because, I will meet someone and I will be fascinated about how funny they are, or how gentle and how kind they are, but not because they are men. Generally, right? Obviously, I mean, it's much more complicated than that. Please, But and I think if our cultural understanding will also be like that we're first and foremost interested of who we are and can develop ourselves of who we are beyond racial, beyond our races and genders also, then I think, you can make the link to that. Then I think, you can make the link to that.
Yeah, I was just now, when you were describing this so well, I was thinking about myself in this whole thing, because I used to really not think of myself as like black or South African or anything like that. And then only it became more and more, through certain encounters and certain experiences. And now that I've been doing these interviews, and also since my father passed about 2 years ago, this sense of that being black is like part of the identity has actually become much stronger. So I was thinking like how your development was in terms of seeing yourself, a part of yourself, at least as being a black person, and how it was for me, and how it's for all types of different people, and how it's really just this small part, but an important part of the identity.
It's super interesting to hear you say that, because, I mean, you say that also when your father passed away, you kind of like came to kind of like also question, okay, what has passed away? What kind of identity, what part of me actually has passed away? And obviously, you will then think about your black cultural heritage, and for me, I didn't ever, I never questioned like whether I'm black or African until I came to Switzerland. And I always say that because it was just not, it was, and Chimamanda says this thing about like, I think it goes something like, I'm not African because African was made by the white man. I'm not Nigerian because Nigeria was created by the European colonists. I'm Igbo because I was Igbo before the European colonists. I think it goes something like that, right? And it's actually so accurate, because for me, even in Rwanda, I mean, I was really young when I left Rwanda, but in Rwanda, then, what are identity matters that you have as a kid? You girl, this is very important. When you grow up, you definitely are a girl, because they're gonna do you like choo-choo and stuff like that. You're gonna have like dresses, and then you may be the smallest in the family, so you're protected. But it was never, and even in Rwanda, it was never a matter whether I'm Rwandian and you know, or something else,
Yeah.
you know. But then when I left Rwanda, all of a sudden I became African,
Yeah.
and I became black,
Yeah.
you know, and I became all these things
Yeah.
that I didn't even know mattered before. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, for me, the fact of migrating, my migration, you know, the migrating part in my history made me have to question identity matter very early,
Yeah.
you know, but
And find out what's
yeah,
even happening.
yeah, what's happening. And as I told you, for a really long time, until 13, I didn't have a term for what this feeling of being excluded, you know, when they would there is this game in Swiss called, it's called like Völkerball, you know,
Yeah.
where they select two, and then they have to select each teams,
Yeah.
and then two teams will go. I was never selected, and I didn't understand it, even though I was really good at it, you
Yeah.
know. I was like, oh, they're stupid. I'm like so good, I'm gonna like kill them, but why don't they select
Yeah.
me? Because they had this and it wasn't even because they didn't like me, but they had this internal ways of being
Yeah.
kids, you know.
Yeah.
And I never understood it until, as I said, I
Yeah.
read my first books.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's also this matter of it being not intentional, but
Yeah.
still being there.
Yeah,
Because it's so
and it's never
systemic.
intentional with kids. They
Yeah.
don't know why they do what they do. They just do it intuitively. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So, from your work or from the little research that I did, it said that decolonizing art history is something that you are interested in and want to do. And what does this involve? And why would you say it is important if you had to make a succinct case for this?
So, decolonizing is I started to use this word because it was like used in science and in art history and in art in general, and in culture, like, yeah, you know, in cultural, I don't know, like, yeah, in the cultural world. So, you know, when you say decolonizing something, it actually kind of like, in general, it means that you're breaking the Eurocentric paradigm, that you're breaking Eurocentric narratives, right? So that's what it means, right? But it doesn't, and that's maybe also like really short term. And decolonizing art history for me means concretely, when you go to art school, I went to art school, I told you, when you go to art school, there is a whole canon of art history that you taught.
Yeah.
So you will learn about, I don't know, Rembrandt, Matisse, you will learn, you know, about all this.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna show how little I know, but no, but
Same
you
here.
know, and you know, I don't know, Claude Monet, Vachon, and then you will learn about Picasso. It's such a good example. Then you will learn about Picasso, Cubanism. You know, you will learn about Bauhaus, and you will learn about all these great masters. And you will think like, how come they're only great masters in Europe? Like,
Yeah.
what's with the other world? And then maybe you will learn about, like, it's always called Chinese tradition. You know, it's African tradition.
Yeah.
You know, Latin American craft. It's always a whole region, but there seems to not have like great masters. Okay, Latin America, it's maybe not so correct because we have Frida Kahlo and her husband, you know, her partner, but it's always like, but Europeans have an abundance of great masters, you know, started by Leonardo da Vinci, and it seems like the other regions don't, but they can't be true. And so there is, and that's called a colonial understanding of history, that you will only put a certain specific people in the forefront of, you know, telling them that they were pioneers and leaders in their crafts, and decolonizing that those historical narratives is to go and look who are the others, because there are others. And then all of a sudden, when you start to dig deeper, you will find out that Picasso, before the Cubist time, you'll find out that he actually traveled to Africa, and he was super impressed by the mask shaping from Benin, from the region of today Nigeria, and this mask shaping that you see in African masks is what you now see in what created this really iconic Picasso signature. This like really one line shape. So he had a deep influence in African art. But it's not going to be taught like that. Obviously, today, yes, right? I have to say correctly. Today, if you go to art school, you will learn that he has traveled to Africa, that he was deeply influenced by that. But it's not the bigger narrative that you will then have when people talk about it. And that's, for me, decolonizing art history, is to look at the bigger picture and also see how cultural influences are never just on one spot, and also maybe detach art history in general from clinging so much on big hero masters, but history has that, because history loves heroes. So history is gonna have, I don't know, Switzerland history has a Wilhelm Tell, whatever, and in art history you're gonna have that. Even in African art history, because there is African, you're gonna have the big place. You're gonna have Monkey, who has influenced Congolese art, so you're gonna have the big ones.
And then I was wondering if you could tell us maybe also just a little bit about your work, because from this description, I'm talking about the work in IAMANEH.
And so, just because it's so funny that you will mention Jean-Michel Basquiat, because I will never cite him if I talk about decolonizing art history, because he is one of a few that already in the 70s made it into the Western canon of art history. So he's not like standing for actually breaking a narrative. He made it and was hyper hyped by Andy Warhol. So he's actually not, he's still in a paradigm of, creating a hype around a persona in the art market that has to fit in what is actually sellable and, what is what pleases the white bourgeoisie. And Jean-Michel Basquiat pleased, he was really he gave everything what the white bourgeoisie was at that moment asking for. So this is for me still in a kind of like Western European canon,
Yeah, true. I mean, I think it's sometimes difficult to escape the clause of commodification, but when I then watched some of his interviews, he was very much aware of what was happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
which is
playing with this.
And he was playing with it, and sometimes and he makes you just thinking. You watch his interviews, and you're like, man, you should have lived just a little longer. Just a little longer, because it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, and he could have also acted more from a position of power in the art world.
Yes.
But zooming in very close to you as a person, as an individual, what have kind of been your experiences? You're just working in the cultural sphere, working in the NGO sphere here in Switzerland. What have been your kind of encounters, confrontations with racism, and how do you handle them?
Well, with racism, I've told you a lot, right? I used to not handle them at all. First of all, it took me a really long time to understand what is racism and when is it happening to me and how does it feel, because I used to be super angry. I used to have anxiety and, be like also super angry all the time. And I didn't it took me a really long time of my life. I'm 38 years old now, you know, and it took me a really long time of my life to understand where that anger is coming from and why am I so frustrated, and to make the link between me being so frustrated and feeling like I'm not seen, I'm not heard, is because I'm experiencing racism, and step out of that and call racism for what it is, and feeling less like I have no agency and feeling less frustrated, less angry, you know. That was a whole development. But today I would say I experience racism more in, like, I don't know if it's more, I could I couldn't really handle it because I didn't know how to handle it in between my like between 17, 15 to maybe like 25, until I had terms for it, until I knew what it is. And also for me, a big thing of how do you handle racism, how do you care for yourself when you experience racism, is solidarity, is finding other people that have the same experiences. Because when you're alone, and that's how I felt, when I was a teenager, I felt I'm the only black girl at school. I'm the only black girl at, I don't know, like Schnupperlehre or whatever, I'm the only black girl there. I'm the only black girl there. And then you're isolated, and you also kind of like only socializing with, maybe Swiss people, like black, white people, and you always have this experience like I'm fighting alone. And by the age of like maybe I would say 17, 18, I started to also kind of like have black friends or people of color as friends. And then this experience of like, then this feeling of experience racism, it's still here, but you can more like laugh it off, or you can more like make jokes, because then you will have someone who has your back, will be like, oh, these Swiss people, man, oh, now we are getting too loud in the tram, let's be loud in the tram, so we piss them really off, but you can't do that alone, So for me, handling racism, caring for myself when I have experience of racism, became easier when I found my peers, when I found other black people that also have the same, that will tell me that they have the same, and then we will get stronger together because we have a shared pain. It sounds weird, but that's the reality of how I lived it. It will be less dragging when we were together.
You have this solidarity. Now, you work as a cultural mediator, and you work in and with museums. Where do you see the role of contemporary museums in working as part of anti-racism?
Big question. First of all, one of the biggest things will be to address it, to make exhibitions on it, to make collaborative, participatory exhibition on what is racism, but also to adjust it, like to address it in the institution itself, to have, a more diverse personnel management, and because if you look at museums, you will still have traditional personnel management. People of color, you will find them in certain jobs and not in others. And it's from, what I mean, it's from down to top. The lower it is, obviously the cleaning personnel will be very diverse, and the directorship not.
And in the course of this interview series, I've also come across this term, racism fatigue. What do you make of it?
I understand it. I have had phases for my master thesis, I interviewed different female artists, black female artists, Fatima Mumuni among them.
Okay.
And one artist that I interviewed that I actually was lucky enough that she allowed me to follow her to her work was Ntando, and she is she does like thousands of things. You should interview her. You should really interview her.
You'll have to give me the name.
She's amazing. So she's an actress first and foremost, but performer and director. And Ntando has had her breakthrough in Switzerland or in Germany actually, by performing pieces about race.
Yeah.
And she will always be very satiric about it. She will impersonate like white, white middle class, kind of like, I don't know, like bourgeoisie making jokes, and then she will have like her black persona, like being the counterpart of it. So it's very satiric what she does, and she had a lot of success with that. Because white people love to laugh about themselves being racist, and she had a lot of success with that, and when I interviewed her, I was like, so what are your next, what do you want to do in the future? And she actually said, well, I would love to be able to think about if I can create something that has nothing to do with race, But the thing is that that's what she's successful with, and I totally understood that, And I have the same thing sometimes. Right now, because of the exhibition on colonialism, I will get not that much. A few. I'll get some emails. Demand on colonialism, and I understand that, and I'm still really eager to talk about it. But at some point, I also want to say, like, hey, but I know other things. I can tell you so much about contemporary Congolese art. Let's talk about new graphic design in Cameroon, because it's fucking dope. There is a lot of things going there. I don't want to talk about colonial powers all the time and colonialism, but me personally, at the moment, right now, what do we have, like the 5th of October, something like that, 2024, I still have a lot of energy because I really want people to understand that the world is complex, and that people are complex, biographies are complex, and I still have a lot of energy. But then again, I don't have kids. I live quite a good life. It always depends what you're going through. Fatigue comes not only from one struggle that you're having. Fatigue comes because most of the time, activist people, political engaged people, have more than one struggle. And then you get exhausted.
Becomes very draining.
Yeah, it becomes draining. And right now, for instance, I'm not struggling financially. I'm not struggling, my mental health is at the moment okay. My health in general is at the moment okay. I'm not struggling in my family. So I can put all my energy in this thing, right? But if I would, I didn't know if I can pay my rent, and then I also have to fight for social justice. Damn, no?
It's too much.
Then it's too much.
Yeah.
So fatigue is an intersectional thing.
Fatima put it so nicely. She said something along the lines of, ich will nicht immer die Rassismus-Tante sein. And I thought that really encapsulated it very nicely. It just gets a bit too much, always having to deal with that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me right now, I'm fine if you need me to talk about colonialism, it's okay. Do you have time? let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. We have this last part in the interview series which you do, which is a kind of, it's intended. I think this is actually the hardest part. It's intended as a call and response kind of segment, where I throw in one word and then you can riff on it just a little bit what comes to your mind.
Okay, wow.
Okay. So first one, Rwanda. I probably mispronounced this also.
Okay, come
Because
again.
I have heard you pronounce it a bit different. Yeah, Rwanda.
Grilled peanuts.
Then Alternative Liste.
Exhausting.
Then the Swiss passport.
Path to freedom.
Okay. Then Melancholia.
An important, how do you say, Treiber? An important
Driver.
An important source for creativity.
Basel.
Roche.
Stay woke.
Don't sleep. I don't know.
Black, brown, yellow, white.
Fun.
Okay, and then the last tiny little bit which we usually do is some kind of recommendations. So that
In terms of museums, I will totally go see the exhibition on Benin Deus in the Colonial Museum, because I really liked how they worked with, the Zurich African Student Association, and they have like a whole wall. I really liked that.
Okay.
And then there is still time to go see the exhibition in Basel when they see us. Maybe a lot of people have told you about it. There is still time to go see when they see us, which is an amazing exercise. For me, it has all the big artists, all the great masters
exactly.
of the African continent and Afro diaspora. So because an art junkie, I have to say now in Zurich there is this amazing retro perspective of Marina Abramovic, which I love because she's one of the most influential performance artists.
I also.
And then in 2 weeks in Basel, there's going to be an opera called Basel Pongo. So it's like an opera from from a group from Abidjan, from the Côte d'Ivoire.
So quite a few, quite rich pickings.
Okay, great.
Very good. Then books, novels, non-fiction, some you could recommend.
Books?
One or two, stand out to you.
Yeah, I'm just reading Freshwater, but I already forgot the name of the author. Maybe you can pick that out.
Freshwater.
Freshwater. I just also finished this really small book. It's called. It has a German title, Eine Nebensache, and it's from a Palestinian author, and she kind of like, it's a novel, but she kind of tells the story out of the perspective of a former Israeli soldier and a Palestinian woman, and how they how their lives kind of like go parallel, and it's a really beautiful and really really soft told novel of like two very different lives, but they intrinsically come together.
That sounds very captivating. And the final question is, if there's questions, stuff that haunts you, that keeps you up at night. It's a question that keeps coming back to you.
Wow, questions that haunt me.
I mean, it might be better if you don't have them, but sometimes they're inevitable.
I think one thing that, has also maybe to do with the time of my life where I am now, is really to how to accept my weaknesses for what they are, but work on my strength without exhausting myself, without always trying to optimize myself. And basically it's just a matter of like how to accept myself as I am. Because it haunts me in different aspects of life, you know, whether it's at work, when I somehow doubt my competences and all of a sudden I'm not sure anymore if, you know, people actually accept me for my competences or if I'm a token, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. But also in my relationship, you know, when I see that I have like cultural differences with my husband, and I'm like, oh my God, why doesn't he understand that? And then to accept that I don't have to change him. I have to accept how we are, that we are different, and that it's okay. So it's at this phase of my life, what haunts me the most, I think, is, you know, being able to differentiate between the things I can control and the things I cannot control, and to concentrate on the things that I can control.
Thank you, that's very well put. And thank you very much, Marilyn, for this interview. It's very insightful, lovely, interesting, fascinating, really great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching episode 9. We'll see you next time, and take care. Bye-bye. Hey.